I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus, I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus, I was evil. I never shook, baby.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Alex. It's been a while since you were last on the pod. We hung out
Yeah.
last June.
May? Yeah, late June. Early June.
That was
Last
it was
year.
early June because I was at a wedding in SoCal and then went up to LA.
Yeah.
And we hung out, but we didn't do a pod together. So it's been a while since we've been on the pod. And by the way, we're the Alex von Sternberg,
That is me.
who hosts History Impossible, a very interesting podcast about history and all different kind of parts of it. But we're gonna focus on today. I think we're gonna do like free speech and Nazis and kind of the typical reckless Musecast topic. Usually those two things it's like every other episode has something to do with those two.
My
titans of podcasts.
Yeah. my partner, she likes to jokingly say like we should have a ticker in the house for how many days it's been since I've brought up the Nazis. Doesn't usually make it past like 2 or 3 days. And I think I'm being generous even when I say that.
One of our longest running bits is the Nazi jar, which we have.
Wait a minute, what?
Oh yeah, we have a Nazi jar. My wife's not a fan of it.
Oh yeah.
Did I just have it on your coffee table?
Yeah, she says, please don't talk about the Nazi jar. I'm like, no, you don't get it. See, it's anti-Nazi. It's about people making dumb comparisons to the Nazis that aren't that are stupid because Nazis were so terrible. So 99% of the time when you're comparing anything today to not, and she usually just tunes me out by that.
Yeah.
Real quick, have you guys seen that movie, that Weird Al movie, UHF?
I have. I saw it actually I think I saw it when it came out even.
And that came in the late 80s. It was like 88
no, I think I was like I was like 5 or 6 when I saw it. I saw it on VHS. A friend of mine had rented it, or his older brother had rented it, and I vividly remember the Boulder parody from Indiana Jones.
Oh, Indiana Jones,
yeah. So yeah, that was like a weird time too, because I associate seeing that and also seeing Who Framed Roger Rabbit around the same time, both of which have bits involving people getting flattened. Whereas with Roger Rabbit, though, it's terrifying.
Right. Well, the reason I bring up the UHF movies because there's a part in the movie where the basic premise of the movie is Weird Al's character inherits like a small cable access, like public access channel, and he puts all these and it's struggling because he's put out like generic content, right? It's like, oh, like we're interviewing local people and we got a kids show, but it's struggling. But then when he decides to I'm gonna like just put a bunch of weird random, like it's basically just Weird Al. It's like weird wacky stuff, and then it becomes like the biggest station in town. And so one of the because the movie came out in the late 80s, there's a segment where he's got a show called Town Talk, and it's making fun of like the like the late 80s, the sort of scandalous talk shows where the rise of Jerry Springer. So he's got a panel and an audience. In the panel, it's like a Jason Voorhees guy, and then like a guy in a Klan outfit, and then like a Satan worshiper, and then like a 12-year-old girl, and then so it's just like random, like a hooker, and it's just he's like interviewing like the worst people, and then it always breaks into a fight, and then there's a commercial break, and he goes, next week on Town Talk, Nazi lesbian hookers abducted by aliens and forced into weight loss programs, all this and more.
What's really funny is I now get the feeling that it's not an outright theft, but maybe it was an homage. I don't know, where Mike Myers did that at the beginning of Austin Powers and the Spy Who Shagged Me, where it was Springer and it was my father wants to take over the world, and one guy is a neo-Nazi, but he just looks like Hitler. Another guy is a KKK member. And I'm wondering if that, I mean, again, it's not stealing the bit, but it is very reminiscent of it.
Right.
But yeah.
All right. So Nazis.
Well, we're actually talking pre-Nazis.
Well,
right. Yeah. Well, and we were just sort of talking about how, I mean, the thing is, this doesn't ever stop. It comes up all the time. Like the comparisons. I mean, like, who would have thought that trying at the last minute to, say that Donald Trump is actually a fascist was not going to work in getting him not elected.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm working on something now. I haven't really worked out the kinks yet, but my sort of sense I'm getting watching this administration unfold from the historical perspective is, if there's really any comparison, it's to a 19th century progressive like Teddy Roosevelt or something. He clearly sees himself that way. He's talking a big game about McKinley, saying like he had beautiful tariffs, and I'm like, yeah. And you know what he did? He ended those tariffs right before he was assassinated because he realized they were a terrible fucking idea.
Right.
So, so in that sense, you could make the argument that, well, there's a little bit of a resemblance to fascism if you want to compare him to a 19th century progressive. They all come from the same soup of the late 19th century. But yeah, like people invoking Nazis, you know, even with the stupid Sig Heiling everywhere, which very clearly became a troll. If you saw Steve Bannon doing it at CPAC, I mean, that was unmistakable.
So does it mean that you're going to go to like an anti-Trump rally carrying a sign saying Trump's a 19th century progressive?
You know what? I should. Yes.
I don't like him.
People will be so confused and angry at the same time. It's like, wait, I like one of those things and I hate one of those things. I don't get it.
Yeah. All you got to do is just be like, well, yeah, look at, and that's sort of my plan is I just kind of want to list off all these things like the weird adventures down in Latin America that involve Panama. You know, that's something Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson got involved in. I don't know about renaming things, but just like that, that bellicose bully pulpit kind of bullshit that he's been doing. That's very like Teddy. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to accept that sometimes because Teddy Roosevelt, even though Woodrow Wilson, I think, has gotten a nice sort of referendum put on him by most people, except David Frum, I guess. He wrote a piece recently saying, hey, maybe we should stop hating Woodrow Wilson. And I feel like everybody was like, shut up. Like, he was not a good president. But Teddy Roosevelt's hard to let go in a lot of ways because even though he objectively was a pretty monstrous person in a lot of ways and a president, he was kind of cool. Like, there's
very cool.
I mean, I hate to say, I did say this when it happened, but when Trump got nicked by that bullet, that was his Teddy Roosevelt getting shot during his speech moment. That was the moment I was like, oh, fuck, this guy's going to win. It's just like, I didn't vote for him, but I didn't really like the alternative either.
Well, when Roosevelt got shot, he was giving a speech, right? And then because he was a hunter, he's like, "Oh, it's in a non-fatal spot, so I'll just continue my speech."
Yeah, I believe the story is that he was shot
by something.
It was like his notes for his speech, like they were in his pocket, and he did get hit.
What kind of pussy ass gun did they have back then that won't even like go through paper?
Well, and I believe he died with that bullet in him. Like they were like, we're not going to take that out of you. Yeah, I know. He kept doing the speech that he was doing for like an hour, 30 minutes, something like that. And then he eventually stopped and said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to leave you, but I've been informed that I probably should not keep speaking for I have been shot. But that takes more than that to take down a bull moose. So, like, I mean, it's kind of cool. It's really cool. And he did judo in the White House. He had a menagerie of animals all over the place. Like, he was a very strange guy. And I don't know. I think the one thing though is I don't want people to think that I'm saying Trump is the next Teddy Roosevelt, because I think you have to actually have beliefs or principles, which I don't think Trump has. Right. Whereas Teddy Roosevelt definitely had beliefs, and he gave us national parks, which I do love that. So, but resemblance to Nazis? No, not even close. And since, we were talking about this earlier, like I was saying, the recent attempt to say that free speech was the reason why the Nazis became a thing. Essentially, it was I don't remember her name, so I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it was a CBS anchor was saying that to Marco Rubio, and to Rubio's credit, even though he's been just very. He really does deserve the name Little Marco at this point. He's just such a sycophant. And he to hhis credit though, made a very good argument against it. And he was just like, that's not how Nazism works. And he's right. Were you guys like thinking of anything else in particular that happened? Am I missing something?
No, it was just that we were talking before we started recording about the Weimar fallacy, that the theory that gets propagated by a lot of more censorious people is that because the Weimar Republic, which in some ways was very free, like liberal, as in like kind of, I guess, like small L liberal, compared to a lot, this was in the 1918 to 1933. And like basically whenever I think Weimar Republic, I always think like cabaret, like that kind of shit. And because it was so free, well, that freedom allowed for very anti-free people like the Nazis to come to power, which is just not true. Like, I mean, and you're the historian here. My understanding is that actually the government there, like, it was free in some ways for the time, but in terms of censorship, it was still very censorious. They tried extremely hard to they put Hitler in prison, for instance, and they tried extremely hard to censor him and his acolytes. And in fact, when he rose to power, they only used that as fodder for like, these are the people who tried to keep me from you. And side note, if you listen to, look, throat clearing here. Hitler was bad. All-time bad guy, right? Not what I'm saying, because I said this before on the podcast. Really not a good guy. I'm not even saying but. However, the fancy but. However, if you listen, so I think AI did this where they played a Hitler speech and they didn't just like have subtitles. That's existed for
years. I remember this. They made it in English.
English, dude. It sounds like the way he speaks. You think because it's German, it sounds angry. He's just like fuck the Jews, fuck the Jews, fuck the Jews. Like that's not what he's saying. He's actually like saying things like, like, well, you do for me what I'm doing for you. Like, we are together. I'm paraphrasing here, like a big sacrament. Like you kind of, all I'm gonna say is like you kind of get it. Like you get how people who got fucked by the Treaty of Versailles, who were in dire straits, would see a figure like that and be like, he's fighting for me. And not only is he fighting for me, but the people who were in power when I was suffering tried to keep him silent and put him in jail.
Right.
So that's actually what the Nazis did and Hitler did when they did inevitably come to power, is that they used that to like as a counter argument, saying like, look, and then they use that to also put communists in jail and any sort of dissident. It kind of started with the most extreme, like most things. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. And then it got to like anyone left of the Nazis.
It pretty much was that from day one. I mean, like they didn't jail all liberals, or social democrats is what the party was called that was in power, who I believe that party still exists today. And I think they just got thrashed really hard by the Christian Democrats and Alternative für Deutschland. I don't pretend to know enough about Alternative für Deutschland, but they're definitely a nasty piece of work when it comes to the right-wing populist parties of Europe. Though, to be honest, what's her face, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, who was like a Mussolini bootlicker, essentially. Yeah, she's moderated apparently.
She has. I don't like your stance on Ukraine recently, but that's just me.
Yeah,
sure. For the like 4 populist right-wing parties in Europe, AfD's pretty extreme. I know that because I'm actually I like the National Rally in France, and like they've moderated a lot comparatively, but AfD is still like pretty far right.
Yeah, and it'll really depend. And that's the thing, is they seem to be making a similar mistake that Weimar did, where but I haven't followed, like I said, too closely. But last I heard, the Christian Democrats, who still won, like they got the majority or plurality in the parliament, they're seeking to form an alliance with the other parties against AfD. Which like that strikes me as not necessarily a good idea based on this history. It's
and every time that there's an Islamist attack in Germany, AfD's numbers just going to continue to go up.
Exactly.
You got to actually fix shit.
There was like 2 attacks, I remember, right? Like right before the election.
There were 2 attacks this week.
Another 2. Oh my God.
In one of the same town. I'm not kidding. In one like the same town. I don't think like it's a big city. It's not like it's Berlin or Munich or anything like that. It's like in one of these same smaller cities that had one of the bigger attacks like last year, 2 years ago. They had another one.
Jeez. Yeah.
Like, then you wonder why the AfD is tripled in size in a decade.
Well, I mean, honestly, it really began for me where I started to well, it just kind of really is a thing I think that made a lot of people kind of wrinkle their nose a little bit at what now I think apparently was the like sort of newest version of progressivism and its world order was when the migrant crisis happened and the way it wasn't talked about, despite horrifying stories. Like the most famous one is the New Year's Eve attacks
in Cologne.
Yeah. All right. Well, no, wait, where was that?
Cologne.
Oh, Cologne. I thought for some reason I thought it was Munich, but regardless, it was mass sexual assolts.
Yeah, and they just tried to be like, oh, well, it's their culture, it's not a big deal. And guess who let them all in?
That's way more racist.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And it's like, guess who let them all in? The
Angela Merkel,
center right party. So it's like when that's the center right, no wonder why that the far right explodes in numbers.
Well, and see, I wanted to show you guys this. Hopefully, your audience can see it. It's that's
Hitler.
That's Hitler after he was
oh shit. That's a real cartoon.
That's a real cartoon. Yeah, after he was basically quote unquote shut up by the laws. Like he was not a beneficiary of free speech at that time. And again, if you make someone, well, it really is one of those things where if you don't have the value of free speech in your culture, it's less of a big deal. But when you say you do, then you are going to produce a backlash. And as you said, Ben, earlier, Weimar was very liberal, and even not even just by, I mean, when you compare it to what came before in Germany, anything is going to look liberal because you had the Kaiserreich, but you know, even by the standards of today in a lot of ways, maybe not today, but definitely compared to the US, I believe they secured the right to vote for women before the US did. With their founding. They were famously very tolerant. You mentioned Cabaret. They were very tolerant of LGBT people. Which is funny because when you hear people like, especially who identify as, you know, on the left saying that free speech was run amok in Germany and that's why the Nazis came to power, that's mirroring the same arguments that a lot of revisionists like to make, where they say the reason why the Nazis came to power is because they had to, so they could put a stop to all this libertinism that was going on and this decadence under Weimar, which is also bullshit. It's not bullshit to say that there were people who really hated it, like all the decadence and the liberalism and so forth. But like that's not why they wanted the Nazis. The Nazis were a radical party. Most people who were conservative back then were anything but radical. They were monarchists. They hated, as you said, the Treaty of Versailles. The Nazis were there's a reason why they and the communists were having pitched street battles for years, pretty much the entire time of the Weimar Republic, and it's because they were the extremes vying for control of the extremes and getting close to the center.
Isn't it crazy, just to bring it back to modern day, how if you look at a map of Germany and the political parties who votes where, East Germany, which was the communist part of Germany, is now entirely AfD.
And that doesn't surprise me at all, because it's similar to how right-wing populism in Europe really started to gain footholds in where else? The ex-Soviet bloc. Hungary, Poland, though Poland has what's not peace and freedom, law and justice. That's what they're called. We have the Peace and Freedom Party, which I keep seeing on the California ballot. I'm always like, what the hell is the Peace and Freedom Party? I've looked into it, and it's like
I took a quiz once that was like, what party do you most associate with? And I got Peace and Freedom.
Isn't it like communist or something?
I think it's like, that was probably a decade ago. I think I got it because I don't know. I think it's like very left wing in some things, but also maybe some populist in some things. Right. Where it's like very anti-interventionist and anti-war. And that's what I've been, even though my politics have gotten, have changed. That is the same thing to me. The lefties who were anti-war. And so I didn't change. They changed. So, but I did remember taking, and I was like, who the fuck are these guys? And it was and then it's always who are, I think now it's not the case, but Roseanne.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Was like that or something.
Was she really?
Yeah. She's a big Trump fan, but
I was going to say she's a lot of things besides being a Trump fan that involve her brain not working quite correctly. but all those but Law and Justice is one in Poland I was talking about, and they lost recently. I believe they don't have power anymore, but the point being, what was that?
What are they?
Oh, they were like the right-wing populist party in Poland. They were the traditionalists or whatever that they ran on the immigration issue. And that was the thing, is that the ex-communist states basically operated in like, no, we're not doing this mode. When Angela Merkel was like almost seemingly unilaterally saying we're going to let all these migrants in, which is what led to Brexit and a lot of things, which I actually haven't even looked into British politics, but it seems pretty chaotic over there too. I don't know.
They never seem, I guess it's kind of across the board, but like they never seem happy. Like one party will dominate. That's very British. Like one party will dominate, like the Labour Party, like absolutely, because conservatives had power for like a decade. Yeah. And then Labour came in and had like a absolute red wave. And now it's like the conservatives are back on the rise. And not only that, Farage and that like third party is like
UKIP,
polling,
right?
Yeah, UKIP. They're like polling better than the conservatives. And they're on the rise. It's like, it's just never, and I don't think that's very good for a culture, but I don't know. I think you need some periods to see like, okay, what's this one about? What's this about? But I mean, we do the same shit, really.
Right. It's just different in terms of the structure. I mean, I would be very happy to see us take a more parliamentary approach to our politics, but that's never going to happen. I mean, that's just,
me too.
That's
I would much rather have a parliamentary system.
Well, I just wish we had I think I might have even talked about this last time I was on. But I've talked about it a lot, is that I really wish that, like, if I had been in charge of organizing the election, which, at that point I might as well just be king, I would have been like, no, Trump, you do not get to be a Republican. You get to be third party. And Republicans, you get to nominate somebody. And Democrats, if you have support for a populist in there, like Bernie Sanders, again, you do not get to freeze him out. Okay. But I really would have liked to have seen an election similar to the one in 1912. And that was the election where Teddy Roosevelt was shot. And that was the only time besides 92 with Ross Perot. I don't know if you guys remember that. We were very young when it happened, but I remember it. I remember Ross Perot. I remember more specifically the Dana Carvey impressions of Ross Perot on SNL. I actually, by the way, just book recommendation, people should read When the Clock Broke by I think it's John Gantz. It's about 1992 or 88 to 92.
You remember the 92 election?
I do. Really? Yeah.
I don't.
Well, my dad was a journalist at the time at the Minneapolis Star Tribune, so I was much more exposed to world affairs and politics, I think, than a lot of people. I remember in so it was 92, so it must have been first grade, where we were we did our own little like classroom election with like the blackboard, which I can't even imagine anyone doing that now. No. But it was like a bunch of 6-year-olds just basically revealing who their parents are voting for. Yeah, exactly. Which so I put down Clinton because that was my parents, and all the Hmong kids in my class put down Bush, interestingly, and a really interesting variety of people put Perot down, and it kind of mirrored the actual election to a certain degree.
See, I remember doing that, but like heads down, so it'd be like, who's voting for this person, and then I remember being much closer than that. I remember the first election I remember is 2000, like very well.
Oh
yeah, I remember 2000, like very like that was kind of like late 90s is really when I like came into consciousness, I feel like, of like sports and world affairs and that sort of shit. So but yeah, I lived in a pretty blue area, mixed, and I was like very blue. But where I grew up. Yeah.
I remember we had a debate during the 2000 election because it was Al Gore and George Bush. And I remember
and Ralph Nader, don't forget.
Oh yeah. But I remember the teacher was like, okay, so, debate the pros and cons of each candidate. And like back then, it was, and I was like, I was in 6th grade at the time.
Okay. I was a freshman in high school when that happened. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but I don't see that happening today. Of like, let's
No.
hey, Kamala or Trump, like
No, the kids
Looks
now
just
the
years.
kids who are voting for Trump would get like sent to the principal's office.
I know.
I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, that's
This
the
one's
one.
broken.
Well, that was the thing also that I'm really glad I didn't see this. Maybe you guys did. I mean, we're kind of going all over the place. We can jump back to
That's-
Weimar at some point.
Okay,
but
we'll get back to
that's
that.
what we do, and I enjoy it.
Podcast.
I enjoy it. I was happy, surprised, pleasantly surprised that I did not see one person in my life do the you don't have a right to talk about the election if you didn't vote or didn't vote for either party or something like that.
This time, you mean?
This time in 2024. I definitely saw it in 2020 because it was 2020 and 2016 because it was 2016. I think people are going to remember 2016 interestingly in the history books. It's a very watershed year, not just because of who won, but just how it just kind of everything changed in a different direction that has now finally come into fruition. For some people, they'll say that's a good thing. I am not so optimistic. But I'm not going to jump to that. My not yet, at least. My point being is that I didn't see any vote shaming, and it was really nice. And I don't know if it's because I just was lucky or if it is because there was that much vaunted vibe shift where people just stopped, being as like angrily political, honestly, except the people who supported Trump. They were the worst winners in any election I've ever seen.
I've seen a little of it from, I think it's one, like, Trump won by, he won, you've heard it 1,000 times. He won popular vote, every swing state, 89% of counties apparently went, like every single city, so it was like hard to argue. In 2016, it was, if a bunch of people, which I hate this argument, by the way, and I'm a truther about this. If you look at every single swing state, and if you're going to ascribe the Greens to the Democrat, then you have to ascribe the Libertarian to the Republican. That's how it works. And Gary Johnson beat Jill Stein in every single state.
He did. So, he was like the best performing libertarian ever, if I remember right.
Yeah. Was Ross Perot not?
He was independent. But he was doing. Okay. Yeah, he was kind of doing a weird populist libertarian kind of thing, though.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So he was. So yeah. Okay. You might be right about that. I think Gary Johnson won around 4 or 5% of the vote, but in every single swing state. In fact, it was Gary Johnson that almost lost the election for Trump.
Yeah.
And it was Gary Johnson who Trump would have won. Trump lost New Hampshire by less than 3,000 votes.
Oh, wow.
No kidding.
So in 2016, he almost won New Hampshire. So like, I hate that argument because it if anything, Trump should have been complaining he could have won more.
Right. Yeah.
Parties. Did you guys see the libertarian debate in 2016? There was one clip that went viral from that.
Oh, I think I know what it is, but I'll let you say it.
Yeah. So what's his Larry Elder was he was the moderator of that, and like it was just in some weird like hall that they rented for this thing.
Larry Elder, like the libertarians are so delightfully shoestring. I enjoy them.
But there's the Larry Elder's reading the question, so they have all the different candidates up there. And again, it's just a bunch of folding tables with tablecloths. Like it was not like an NBC studio. It was just some like high school gymnasium thing or something. But Larry Elder asked the question. Should states still require people to get a driver's license? And then one guy goes, "Hell no!" And then one guy goes, "What's next? Are they going to make you get a license to use your own damn toaster?" And then it goes to Gary Johnson, and he goes, "Well, I'd like to see some." Proven proficiency in driving, and then everyone starts booing him. It's just, and he's just kind of like, "Hey, like I said what I said." Like
that was not the thing that I ever was thinking of, but I do remember that too. I was thinking of the time where they were talking about the effects of marijuana on like your energy level or something, and Gary Johnson just kind of stands up and pretends to faint on the ground. It was so fun. Yeah,
I need to go to a libertarian debate. They seem like more of like a rock concert rather than like...
Oh yeah. Well, apparently the RNC this last year became very libertarian-esque. I don't know how much that had to do.
A lot of comedians went.
Well, right, and a lot of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire specifically, they're the ones who kind of flipped the party towards a more MAGA orientation, which to me just doesn't make any sense. They're the libertarians that love RFK Jr., which like There's so much wrong with that sentence alone.
Yeah.
Like the man wants to put climate change deniers in jail. He literally has said that.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if he still believes it, but he did say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but the nominee this last time, Chase Oliver, I don't think he's of that orientation. I think that they secured I think the more moderate voices in the party secured power at that point. I'm not really sure, but I ended up voting for Chase Oliver because when people ask me, I'm just like, he was the only gay candidate. That's just because that's the only thing that'll satisfy people at this point. But and he was and is it was he no longer is now that he's no longer running.
They got to him.
They got to him exactly. Yeah,
I didn't realize he was gay.
Yeah. He probably doesn't advertise it all that much. He's open, but he's yeah. I mean, and that could end up. I mean, people are speculating who the Democrats got next, and I'm just like, no one that we should know. We shouldn't know their name. Like at this point.
I hope it's is it Jasmine Crockett or whatever?
God, no.
I hope. She's a treat. I like her.
Is she that blue-haired lady?
No. She's the one who got into a cat fight with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
She's like the next.
Oh, that's right.
She would have been Squad if it was like the same year. She's like the social media, very race baity, very progressive, which is crazy that like two of the most. Well, the Al Green guy who just got thrown out, and like they're actually both like Texas Democrats. Which shows how Texas is like in some of those cities you can be very left wing and win, just like in California. Like there are really red parts of California, and
pretty much everywhere outside of the Bay Area and LA. And LA itself is way more politically heterogeneous than people realize. I mean, Joe can probably attest to that too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, I don't know what your neighborhood looked like during the recall election, but there was a lot of recall Newsom signs in my neighborhood.
Really?
But I live also in a very Latino neighborhood. And again, the dirty secret that people across the board, like Tucker Carlson or the Democrats, don't want to hear is that Latinos are going to be the base for the Republican Party for years to come.
Yeah, a lot of them are very religious,
right?
And they like being able to like they don't like being told what to do in terms of like job, like the lockdowns. There's a reason that I could have called Nevada going red. Like that was actually my lock. If I had to bet, I thought Nevada was going to go red well before any of the Rust Belt and Georgia. I think Arizona, I was like, that's going to go red again too. I think that was a fluke. But like I was like, Nevada's going to go red. It is such a service economy, and the Blues shut it down.
Yep.
Yes.
Like they just shut it down, and that's just not going to fly in such a Latino service-based economy state.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and there's the famous story of Starr County in Texas, which I believe is the most Latino county in the country.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because if you look at the trend in 2016, it was a minority position to vote for Trump, but then in this last one, it was like 90%.
No. In 2016, Clinton won it by like 60 points.
Right. Yeah.
And then Biden, did he barely win it?
I think it was barely. And then
Trump won by a lot. And that's like all of, like, if you look at like Texas has been red for a while, but it's changed how it's been red, where it used to be like all north, east was all red and the cities were blue, but with more red. And now it's like the cities are kind of more blue, some red. And the South though is like all red now, except for like a couple counties, which has totally changed. And it's only got like, in fact, Texas, Trump did better in Texas than Kamala did in California.
Wow.
I think it's something like that. Well, like that's wild.
But to be fair, and you did write about this, is how you came onto my radar, man, if you remember right. But way back, with when you wrote that piece about Kamala back in 2019, about how she's basically she was a terrible, prosecutor here. And I think us Californians, we already didn't like her, so it was not surprising when she didn't like, it's not surprising, I should say, that she did so poorly here comparatively, because she doesn't have a good reputation here.
She barely won the attorney general race, like the first one. I think she like barely eked it out in California.
Right. Well, I actually just learned about this from a friend of mine who does a history podcast called Dangerous History. My friend CJ, he was telling me about the. I have not looked into this, but yeah, I know about these families. There's the four families of California. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's basically the Browns, like Jerry Brown.
Yeah.
And we'll see. And I'm going to get it right. I actually don't remember all of it, but it was a concept I had never heard. Oh yeah, the Newsomes, obviously, and a couple others. And they have basically had a stranglehold on California politics since the 70s, I want to say, or 60s even. And it just hasn't. And that's why, California is so politically sclerotic, despite it actually being pretty diverse as far as like political populations go. I mean, that actually, to be honest, that was the last big episode I put out on my podcast, was the special one I threw together. I don't know how I was able to do it so quickly, but I just wanted to talk about natural disasters, and it was inspired by the fires that happened here. And honestly, the more I looked into California's governance regarding fires, it's been a problem for even longer than since the 60s. It's been a problem pretty much the entire history of Hollywood. I mean, there's a book, I'm blanking on the guy's name. It seems like Bob Davis or something. Mike Davis. And the chapter in this book is called "The Case for Letting Malibu Burn." And it was a very famous book, or chapter, I should say, very provocative in the 90s when it came out. And he's just making the point, and he's a socialist, so he would make very easy time making this point. But he's saying, like, look, they know that this is a bad place to invest in for real estate. This is not a sustainable area, and it has nothing to do with the earthquakes. It's all about the fires. It's extremely steep, cliffs. Very prone to wildfire destruction, and very hard to fight. And there's the part that blows my mind is how even today we just can't somehow get our shit together and get water reclamation under control here. We just can't. I mean, and I remember learning this thanks to a really good article by Matt Welch over at Reason. They were talking about, or he was talking about, how there was I think it was Proposition 1 is what it was called. And it was passed in 2014. And now that I think about that election, it happened right when I moved into LA. So I have an excuse that I wasn't able to vote for it, I guess. But not that it would do any good, because Proposition 1 earmarked $2.7 billion to be used for water reclamation, desalination plants along the coast, reservoirs, stuff like that. And do you want to guess how many have been built? Desalination, water reclamation of any kind?
Zero.
Exactly.
Nice.
How is that
years.
possible?
It's, to be fair to the state government, it's not just them sitting on their hands. There's a lot of bureaucratic red tape, a lot of legal red tape. Apparently, a lot of business interests don't want to do that because they would have to cede land, I believe, as part of it. But it's a systemic problem. I mean, there's a water reclamation project up in the Central Valley of California. I don't have the name in front of me, but that particular project has been on the books to happen and hasn't happened since Eisenhower was president. So there's a certain amount of shakeup that I think does need to happen. So I understand the impulse to vote for somebody who wants to just break shit. But I feel like that makes more sense on local levels, less sense on a national level. And like, I mean, to jump back to the 1912 election comparison I was making, I would love to have a situation like that, because that was, Republicans and Democrats. You had Woodrow Wilson and Taft. It's like
Taft,
bathtub man.
Love Taft.
Yeah, I love Taft. I feel bad for him every time I read about him, and not just because he got stuck in a bathtub, but he just couldn't make anybody happy. But yeah, then Teddy Roosevelt went third party, and Eugene Debs, the socialist, actually scooped up something like 4 or 5% of the vote. So
I thought it was closer to 10, but
it might have been for 1912, or maybe
that was a wild election. I'm a big Taft softy, because we're talking about like school. When I was a kid, we all got assigned, I forget what grade it was, might have been 4th grade.
Sure.
We all got assigned a president, and he was who I got assigned, and you did a report on him. And then in college, I wrote like this big paper on him, because he's the only person ever to be president, Supreme Court justice.
That's right. Yes. And I remember there was talk for a while that Obama was
Justice.
going to get nominated by Biden. I was thinking that would be interesting.
I don't think
sure
Obama wants to do that shit.
I don't think Obama wants to do anything at this point.
Yeah,
he's supposed to chill.
He's the Instagram president. He just throws parties and comes in every so often to yell at Democrats.
You mean yell at black men for being insufficiently woke or whatever?
Yeah,
Or yeah, that was painful to watch. I was like, don't do that, man. Like that. Let people. I honestly, I don't really care about who wins as much as I care about the idea that we can kill this idea of demographics being destiny. We were kind of talking about that earlier. I really hate that idea. It is a poisonous belief that Democrats are resting on really since the Johnson administration. There's that apocryphal story about Johnson using a racial epithet to say we'll have them voting for us for the next 100 years or something. I don't think that actually happened. But I'm sure he believed it. I mean, he was the ultimate don't give a fuck president about censoring himself. But yeah, it also kills the very obvious racism of the Great Replacement theory that still somehow manages to come up. And again, I just want to say to all the conservative people I know, what do you not understand that more Latinos in this country are going to help your politics? And the answer is no, they don't care because a lot of them are racist if they're believing the Great Replacement theory, at least.
Right.
Oh, you know what? That segues us back to the Nazis.
Yes, we always come back.
Exactly. Well, because the Great Replacement theory, it wasn't the same, but it always has the Jews involved in it, according to the people who believe it. And that was kind of the idea that Hitler loved to spread around, and that is also the idea he got in trouble for all the time. He was not,
what was he saying? The Jews were gonna not outnumber them.
No, it's more that the main sort of conspiracy theory that he trafficked in, and he trafficked in a lot, obviously. But the main one was what is now known as the stabbed in the back myth or narrative, whatever you want to call it, where he was saying that the reason why Germany lost World War I was because those in power who were politically radical, Bolshevists in his case. I don't know if he was he was using that term by then. And in his mind, and in the minds of a lot of people, including Winston Churchill, actually, to be fair, that Bolshevists and Jews were basically synonymous. But Hitler took that to a literal extreme, and he was basically saying we were stabbed in the back by these radicals in our government who wanted us to lose, and that's why we're all suffering. And I think it was a fear of communism, but because again he made communism and not Judaism itself, but Jews, he made them synonymous. That's really where the whole kind of fuel for his conspiracy-addled brain came in. But I mean, that doesn't even get into his weird, beliefs about himself as a messiah, though. So his religious beliefs are crazy.
I heard that during World War I, a mortar landed next to him, but it didn't go off. And
Really?
kind of, like a bomb landed next to him. And so that
fought? I didn't know he fought in World War I.
Well, he was on the front lines. He was a messenger.
Really?
Yeah. He got the Iron Cross for bravery. And part of that had to do with him surviving a gas attack. I know that. And he was blind for like a month. And he had no idea if he was ever going to see again. I mean, that's the thing that I get kind of annoyed at, attempts at Third Reich revisionism, because we've all gone through this before. We don't need to go through it again. Right. And everybody who wants to have a supposedly nuanced point about the Nazis, it's going to turn into debate about how many nozzles actually funneled Zyklon B. You know what I mean? It's like, just stop it. We have the evidence. It's not. Anyway, I'm not going to spiral onto that because I've talked enough about how much I hate Holocaust revisionism.
When I was like, wait, revising what? Like it didn't happen? Is that the argument?
That's the thing about Holocaust revisionism is that it includes Holocaust denial. It's kind of a spectrum. Yeah, it's like you go from denial at the most extreme to saying, it wasn't actually 6 million, it was 1 million or something. And we can really thank David Irving for that. He was That's actually, you know what, that's an interesting free speech argument as well, which we can circle back to before I finish. What was my thought? Well, I think I was just basically just saying that, no, I hadn't said it yet. I was just going to say that I think one thing that is worth remembering too is that Hitler was not only like very unwell mentally, I think he probably had PTSD from the war, and that almost certainly affected his behavior.
Wasn't he on meth also, like, all the time?
He was on a lot of what now we would call meth. Yeah, that's a great book called Blitzed that people should check out if they haven't. It's all about, it's such a good book.
I can't think of anything scarier than a bunch of angry German guys in the military on methamphetamine.
They were staying awake for like days on end, so they're going crazy on top of all of that.
Well, the reason I brought up the mortar not going off next to Hitler's because. Yes, so I actually heard that from Jordan Peterson on one of his podcasts, and he was bringing up how that, like, an incident like that can really inspire someone to be like, "Oh, I was meant to survive.
Yes,
I'm important."
Yeah,
I think that probably did happen then. I mean, Jordan Peterson has said some dumb things about the Nazis, namely that they were an atheistic movement, which is not true.
Right.
But I'm inclined to believe that because that's just I mean, at the very least, Hitler claimed it. I mean, we can, that actually does. Yeah. I remember that was for me when I was like, okay, I meant to be a pedantic asshole about history when Jordan Peterson called the Nazis atheistic. And I see what he was saying when he said it, but it's like such a loaded way of saying it.
Right.
I also really hate
cultists.
They were cultists. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing too.
Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah.
The funny thing is that really if you're talking about Heinrich Himmler and the SS, that is not far off. Like they really did, like he sent people to Tibet to look for Shambhala. Like these people were very serious about their occultism because Germany was very much into the esoteric at that time. That time being basically post Nietzsche all the way into the Third Reich. Like what
I also want to say, of course, when we talk about the free speech thing and people talk about the Nazis, and of course, obviously the focus is on Jewish people because they were by far the biggest population that were killed and all that. But I've been to Dachau. They have memorials for all types of people who were there. They have Catholics, Protestants, Jehovah's Witnesses,
homosexuals
homosexuals.
Wait, were the homosexuals mostly put in Dachau? Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't remember.
There was a camp specifically that like had a lot of gay people.
I don't remember that. I specifically remember though there being one for Protestants who were rounded up, Catholics who were around, like dissident Protestants, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses. I can't remember if gays were there too, but obviously they were also. So it was like it was all type of people.
Yeah. Well, there's and that's actually I can make this a little bit more of a culture podcast instead of just us talking about history, but I really think people should see the movie A Hidden Life that Terrence Malick made back in 2019, 2020. And it's all about this guy named Franz Jagerstatter, who I believe was Austrian. He lived in the Alps and with his family, but he was a devout Catholic and he was ultimately executed by the Nazis by guillotine. Because he refused to pledge loyalty to Hitler over God. It was just a very small, again, to use that word, pedantic thing. But it's a very powerful story about like how much how far you'll go for your values in the face of.
There's a book I read that they also made a movie about. It's he's like Luxembourgish.
Okay.
Who is in a Nazi camp. It's like prison block, then like the number like 5274, and it's the same thing. Like he's a priest, and he's priest block. That's it. It's priest block, and his whole I guess block, whatever you want to call it, not cell, but you know what I mean. Like they were all priests, so they're priests from all over Germany, Central Europe. It's the same thing.
Well, that's why I find it so annoying and offensive, even when you have people claiming the Nazis were some Christian nationalist movement, and all comes from this book called Holy Reich, which, I believe the guy who wrote it is a well enough regarded historian, but it's just bullshit. It's like, why? Because their belt buckles said God is with us? Like, that's not evidence of anything. And also, the Nazis, especially the higher ups, hated Christianity. They despised it. They thought it was weak.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you've done extensive work on this. Wasn't there I don't know how serious it ever got, but a consideration for the Nazis to become Muslims.
Not become Muslims, but to ally themselves with them. Yes, it was. It was a. There was a lot of remarks made by members of the SS, especially Himmler and Gottlob Berger, his right hand man, who they both loved Islam. Like Himmler kept a Quran by his bed. He was he didn't follow it. He wasn't a Muslim himself, but he saw Islam as an anti-Jewish religion. Which,
there's
kind of ironic at this point.
There's a Venn diagram there. Of, extreme Muslim, and the Nazis. Middle.
Well, and that's the thing is because I would never accuse the Nazis of being good with history, but they weren't wrong to characterize Christianity as an outgrowth of Judaism. It literally was. But then they also got weird about claiming they tried to say that, but also and call like Christianity weak and unmanly, whereas Islam was very manly to them, a religion of warriors, they would always say. But they also tried to claim Jesus as an Aryan, which it's like you don't like Christianity, but you think you have Jesus.
I love blonde Jesus. I love when I go into church and they have a big Nordic Jesus. If you ever go in, where they have one of that. If you ever go into, I visited for college, a Catholic university. I didn't go there, but it was like one of the schools. Sure. I got in there and I didn't want to go there. But they're big, I guess, basilica or maybe cathedral even in DC, and they have a big blonde Jesus there. It's great.
I see a big Mexican Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the movie is called The Ninth Day. It's a 2004 German historical drama.
Okay.
And it's about a Catholic priest from Luxembourg who it is Dachau. So
okay, yeah, because when you were describing it, that sounded familiar to me. So did I see it? I saw Downfall when that came out. And that was the same year.
They crucified some of them.
Literally crucified them?
Literally.
That's
I don't know if they like nailed. I don't remember them like nailing, hands in or whatever, but I know even on the cover of the book, on the cover, there's like a guy on a cross in the concentration camp.
Yeah, and that's sort of people shouldn't mistake like the Nazis for the boogeyman they assumed they were. In some ways they were worse, I think, than people realize.
Dude, and I'm sorry just to go off on like Dachau.
No, it's fine. Here,
but I went on this tour where this guy, I swear to God, and he was so highly rated. He was Irish. And it was like, oh, you have to do his tour. He gives the best tours of Dachau. This guy, he somehow made this tour one that you would disagree with, where he basically blamed the Catholics for everything. Like the Catholic Church was behind all this, which again, like you're saying, is just not true. And I'm a Catholic, and I'm just like, that doesn't sound right because they had a bunch of there's the memorial for the Catholics who were fucking here. And two, he basically made it. I don't know how he did this, but he's one of those guys who would just like make everything anti-America. It was like we beat these motherfuckers, and somehow we're to blame. It was like, yeah, the Nazis were bad, but the real bad guys were the Americans. It's like,
jeez.
I
had some issues with the Catholic Church being Irish, probably, and then Americans, but
yeah.
Don't go on this tour. This was like
I do want
11 years ago.
But I do want to go to Dachau. I mean, I want to go to. I've never been to Germany in general, and I would spend a lot of time doing.
Love Germany,
stuff, but yeah,
not gonna lie, Dachau's kind of a downer.
Yeah, I want to go to Auschwitz one day, and I know that's going to be a downer.
It's kind of a downer.
Definitely
check it out.
Yeah, I'm now trying to speculate on this Irishman's like politics because I can probably guess some of them at this point.
We're not good.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah, I mean, now I think there is something to be said about the Vatican's complicity during the Holocaust. Pope Pius, I think it was Pius XII, was the one in power who enabled the rat line to occur. So a lot of Nazi criminals escaped to South America through the Vatican.
Didn't they do shit like that? But then didn't the Pope also help Jews or something?
Yeah. And it's also, you can't really make a generalization too much. Like, whether it's the Pope or all of Christianity or all of Islam, for example, I mean, there's people who like to point out that there were Jews who served in the Wehrmacht, and yes, there were Mischling there, but they weren't meaningfully Jewish in any way. They hadn't been part of the faith or anything like that. They weren't part of the community. And also I think a lot of them ended up never even serving. I'm not clear on that, but a lot of hay is made about.
I know
sort of
that
thing.
getting back to like the free speech angle of it, I remember the whole Skokie, Illinois neo-Nazi thing, and one of those guys, like the leader of it, he like found out he was Jewish and just like totally left and like became Jewish or something. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Well, that just shows that what he was lacking in his life. Clearly,
something like
Speaking of
that.
censorship and the Nazis, so I started this series on Medium called Nazism and Wokeness, and I was not trying to say that. I was not trying to compare wokeness to Nazis. I wasn't doing that, but I was like,
you kind of can a little bit though. I mean,
well, here's the thing. At least when it was specifically around the arts.
Okay.
The way, I mean, this is back during the heyday of cancel culture and deplatforming and anything. It was like there were so many similarities to like their rhetoric versus what the Nazis were doing to arts. And so I wrote this I started a series. I only got 3 parts in. I think it was gonna be like an 8-part series, but I only got 3 parts in. But I pulled up the articles right now, and the first one that I wrote, the first installment, had a I managed to find like a royalty free like image of a swastika, and I had that as the main image, but Medium censored it. They just like
really
it's black. It's just like a big black space where the image was, and like the article is still up, and it actually got a decent amount of traffic. But I haven't pulled it up in a while until today, and it's like, oh,
interesting.
Shit. Yeah,
because I
blacked it out.
Well, it hasn't been a problem for me lately on my podcast host is Spreaker. It's they're under iHeartRadio, and I was under Podbean for a while, and I was trying to put out my series called The Muslim Nazis, which is, honestly, I've come to kind of regret making that title, but you got to get people's attention. It's like,
I've done that before.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm above it. That's all I'm saying. But there's
I did write an article called, it was, I can't remember. Anyway, go on.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Well, no, the thing is that with Podbean, they had some kind of automated system in there, so that whenever I put the name up, the Muslim Nazis 1, 2, 3, just each episode, it would just automatically just turn into the Muslim. They just omitted the word, and I actually had to reach out to somebody at the company, and they fixed it for me. But then I ultimately got with Spreaker, and I was able to actually, make some ad money on the podcast at that point. Yeah, they haven't done any kind of like censoring like that, though. From what I hear, I have not jumped onto YouTube. I mean, I use YouTube all the time, but I have not put any of my stuff on YouTube, thanks to a lot of people I know who do stuff on YouTube, your guys included. But specifically, I have I'm actually wondering, this episode wouldn't even be able to get monetized because we use the word Nazi in it.
Don't worry, we're not going to monetize that.
We've accepted our lots in life.
Well, I was just going to say though, a friend of mine, my friend JD, he does a really good history travel show where he like looks at battlefields, artifacts, stuff like that, and he's doing really well for himself with it too. But every single time he does anything related to World War II, it doesn't even matter what he says. If it's World War II related to Germany or the Nazis, it instantly gets the little yellow $sign, like demonetized immediately.
Yeah, it's crazy. And seeing YouTube content creators censor themselves. So they always have to bleep out whenever they say, and they do this themselves. This is not YouTube.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so like they always rape, they'll bleep out the word rape.
Yep.
They won't say sexual assault. They'll say, so and so got essayed.
Yep. Essay. Yeah.
Oh, and then porn. If you the replace that with prawn or something like this.
I've heard corn. I mean, which is very funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to have to deal with that, honestly. And I'm cutting myself off from a potential revenue stream, but I'm never going to be able to get a revenue stream. That's the problem. And the thing is, that is different. I mean, I think like companies deciding they don't want to associate their brand with something that talks about a contentious subject or just a sad subject, even, that's fine. I get it. I mean, but there was like for a while a sort of like concerted effort, it seemed like, to keep things censored, at least on YouTube. I don't know if it ever really expanded beyond that too much. I haven't tried to do much content creation on Instagram either. I don't want to have TikTok on my phone. So because I don't want you know, the CCP listening in on my conversations.
Right.
Though I don't think they actually, but wait, actually, what happened with that? I derailed us. What happened with the TikTok ban? Because didn't Trump say he was going to overturn the ban?
Yeah, and he did, right? Or at least he or at least paused it.
Yeah, I feel like that just got like, I'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
Whatever.
We're just gonna make some African kids starve to death first. Yeah.
Let's figure that out.
Yeah. No, and that was a funny thing. I like when it comes to talking about the Second World War or the Holocaust more specifically, even when something ugly like denialism comes up, it should be allowed to exist. And we should also be allowed to dismiss it as something not even worth debating if we want. I know people who think that it should be debated just because that is the right thing to do in a free speech society. But I think the right thing to do is to not compel people to talk about stuff they might not want to talk about.
Right.
Because it is a waste of time. The thing with a Holocaust denier is they're always going to have more quote unquote facts than you do because they always have a vested interest. And it's like with debating any conspiracy theorist, honestly. Like nothing is going to like no matter what comes out of those JFK files or MLK or RFK files that are, I think they did get released or they're being released. No matter what they say, people are going to be not happy with it. We already saw it happen, and I don't blame people, but we already saw it happen with the Epstein files. The first round of them got released with redactions, and people are like, well, what are you hiding? And now granted, I make a little bit of an exception when it comes to Epstein, because I'm like, yeah, well, what are you hiding? Come on. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
that was a letdown.
It was, but it was also the least surprising thing ever for me, honestly. Yeah, I was very, but yeah, like the thing is with David Irving, the guy who is the sort of arch Holocaust denier in history, though technically he's not a historian, he's an archivist, and that's really where his skill always lay, and his ability to get sources other historians couldn't, because he was, you know, able to talk to ex-Nazis as a fellow traveler, essentially. So he got in good with them, was able to get information you couldn't get anywhere else. But he was not, you know, he was not censored the way people have portrayed him as such for talking about the Holocaust denial. He's been arrested in countries where you're not allowed to do that, but he didn't go to court when he did, and what ultimately discredited him, because he was being censored. He went to court because he tried to sue Deborah Lipstadt for calling him a Holocaust denier and thus a racist, even though he almost certainly was, if you look at any of the evidence out there, and especially now. I think there's people who believe that he only became radicalized because of how he was treated, and that's just not true. But Lipstadt, to her credit, and I think she does deserve a lot of credit, is she always maintained Irving should not be censored. He should be allowed to say whatever he wants about this sort of thing, because if you just, again, if you keep denying the ability to talk about this stuff, you're going to just make that stuff feel more salient to people who are suggestible to such things.
Right.
And that's the part that I find so frustrating when I hear people talking about how essentially there needs to be a referendum on free speech. No, there doesn't, because every time there was a referendum, it gave power to the people you were trying to censor. And I think it's not even just talking about contemporary politics that proves that. It's literally using the example that they try to use, the Nazis. They benefited from censorship, both by being able to act as victims of it, because they were, and then use it against the people that had done it to them. I mean, that's the stuff that I think bothers me so much about the free speech debate. It's a cliche to say that the people you censor are going to use the tools you're using to censor them against you one day. It's a cliche, but it's true. It absolutely is true.
Yeah. We've been saying it for years.
Yeah. No one listens. No one cares.
Well, I mean, it's also just like, you know, the Streisand effect too, right? So, and again, getting back to the Nazis. So they had two major art exhibitions, one that was celebrating great German art, and the other one that was celebrating degenerate, Jewish art. And so they took all this Jewish art, but it was all like ramshackle. These kind of like all the paintings were like tipped over and everything. So
that'll show them
exactly. Yeah, but guess which exhibition attracted the largest audience? The Jewish one, like the degenerate ones. Was that this is the stuff we that's banned that we shouldn't be showing you? That's the one that attracted the biggest audience. That compared to great German art.
Yeah, well, and like, what I don't understand why people don't. I don't understand why people don't understand that. I feel like I say that a lot in conversation, like with my partner sometimes, and she has to remind me it's because not everybody cares about these things. They just they just go about their day.
They're called casuals.
Exactly, normies or whatever.
Normies, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if you don't go, well, and that's the other thing too, is that I think it cuts across ideology. It doesn't matter who you're talking about or what. It's like people are going to go for what they believe they're not allowed to see. And that's kind of what always is, not always, but lately in the last like decade or so, it's really bothered me about Hollywood is they've become increasingly corporatized, you know, in what they put out. And yet they have people working on their shows and movies that were designed by a committee, essentially approved by a company as as part of an IP. And they're acting like they're auteurs. That don't give a fuck about what the audiences want. And I'm just like, you guys, you're not rebels.
That's a whole nother episode, which we could do.
Okay, yeah. Because I did not watch the Oscars, but I did watch Conan's opening monologue, and I'm just happy that he got to do it. Yeah, he's always
Conan. Yeah,
I always love Conan. Yeah,
Conan's great.
I wish the really base trans actress won though. I became such a stan for her as soon as I saw her tweets. I was like, oh man, this is far even for me. Come on.
That would be so confusing because it'd be like, well, I don't like what she said, but she's trans, so I feel obligated. And then right would be like, oh, I tweeted that today. I put the picture of all like the people in the car with the sunglasses, and it's like, you know, when the Gascon tweets about BLM and Muslims. It's like, you know, I think Amelia Price should have won Best Picture.
Dude, if I was her and like I had just won, I would like immediately tweet, you know, like something ridiculous, like skull sizes matter or something like that.
What if she got up and she just like threw on a MAGA cap and then,
with like sequins, like a really a bling MAGA cap. Oh man,
it's so funny.
Yeah, yeah, that is a whole other subject. I was going to say I have thoughts on Timothy Chalamet's SAG-AFTRA speech. I thought was fucking dope. Where he was
I'm a big Chalamet fan.
Yeah, well, he said, "I aspire to greatness." We're not supposed to say that. I'm like, oh man, is Gen Z becoming based? Like, this is awesome.
They are.
Yeah, actually, and Susie Wise, Barry Wise's sister, just wrote an article about this, about how like now we're past the sort of post-ironic, like the sort of like now we're in the post-ironic generation now. So now it's like eagerness and sincerity. Yeah. Where it's like, oh, like I don't really care about stuff anyway, but you know, follow me on Instagram. But now we have a younger group of people saying, hey, I want to do something great. And she brought up Timothy Chalamet's speech, and then she also brought up Elon Musk, of just being like, I want to do something big and crazy. Let's all do it. Let's, you know, obviously we need what he's doing with the Doge is a separate other thing, but like that's the idea.
So are you telling me that the Gen Z is aspiring to be a bunch of Ubermenches?
Well, I mean, to be honest, like there is that risk of like, you know, they are a deeply damaged generation by COVID, but that, you know, so that does kind of make me a little concerned, but I made
it back, man.
Well, yeah, I know exactly. And I was going to say that there is a certain, I have a certain suspiciousness of what you're talking about in the arts, I guess, but it's broader than that. It's a meta-modernism is what it's been called, where it's like we had postmodernism that kind of dominated with our generation and then peaked. And now with Gen Z, it's this new meta-modernism that I think people have argued derives from somebody like David Foster Wallace or something, which makes me really hate it on a knee-jerk basis. But that's because I'm a postmodernist. I mean, I'm a Bret Easton Ellis guy. Bret Easton Ellis and Chuck Palahniuk are my Gen X writers of choice.
I do like Chuck Palahniuk. I am noticing that now there's like literally in the past few months, maybe even less than that, I've started seeing like accounts targeting, like it'll be like millennial cringe, and it'll be like, you know, TikToks or even like Vines from however long ago that was like really cringy millennial stuff, or now it's like making fun of people in like 2011, like wearing big hats and eating at like Yummo Burger and like
everything is cute.
And I'm like, oh man, they're really coming for us now.
Yeah, and we deserve it. That's the thing. I do believe that. But you know, I'll keep us on track with the Nazis. I am worried that like the thing is that the Nazis were very much they weren't meta-modernists, but they were very deeply influenced by Romanticism. They were very much in favor of that stuff. They love
like
talking
we are,
about
Joe.
Well, No, honestly, people try to blame Nietzsche for the Nazis, which doesn't make any sense because Nietzsche didn't hate Jews. He actually loved Jews, kind of to a point where you're like, okay, we don't need you to love us this much. Come on. But yeah, no, it was his sister who didn't like Jews and who really liked the Nazis. That's just
I've heard that too.
Yeah, it's a fun little Nietzsche fact there. But yeah, no, the Germans who were really, well, I like to jokingly say the Nazis were they were sort of the D&D nerds of their day. They loved a cult. They were really dorky. Heinrich Himmler, if you read any of his biographies or are able to even get a hold of his like diaries, usually in those biographies, the man was obviously an incel until he had the power to order women to sleep with him. At least.
Look, and I will say this till I'm blue in the face. The whole world is run by nerds, incels, and theater kids, and they're at a triumvirate war that is constantly a struggle between those three. And the Nazis were nerds with a big army, and that's what happened.
Yes, exactly. And I was just thinking this yesterday, and I wanted to write it down because I think I did want to tell you guys my theory, but I guess you have it too. Is that we've been living under the discretion, we'll say, culturally, but also politically and socially in a lot of cases, of a bunch of theater kids who got way too much power. And that is not a good thing. But the alternative,
I married one,
is okay. Well, one of the good ones. One of the good ones.
No, she hates politics, but
and I was going to say, like, there's the theater kids who just want to do theater, want to act, want to be in movies, whatever. That's fine. That's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're designed to do.
Exactly. You're not designed to run a department of disinformation. Remember that lady?
Oh, she had that
song.
Mary Poppins song.
Oh, God.
The epitome of it.
Oh, man. Like, no one should get
I've never thrown a chair at a woman before, but I might.
I don't know which one of us said the more wrong thing there. Either you said throw a chair, and I said I don't think death threats are a good thing, but no, but that was one of those moments where I was like, why do you think this is a good idea? And that is the one way I kind of like I'm very tentative when I say this, but I know I can say it to you guys, but I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't want him to be president, but I'm glad he won compared to the alternative. The fever needed to break. And again, the alternative is looking like a horrible nightmare right now. I'm actually not even going to go off on the whole Ukraine thing. That is a podcast in and of itself. But I am not
talking about the Street Fighter thing though, right?
Which Street Fighter thing?
Oh, a bunch of Democratic lady.
Oh my God! They never learn. It's so cringy.
So you don't remember Street Fighter?
No.
In Street Fighter was where you're picking your player, like the old arcade games, and then every time you land on a different player, they would be kind of like bobbing in place, And so AOC and a few others, they all did their own version of that, where they jump and then they kind of
and I'm like, stats. It'll be like first Latinx elected to this. It'll be like,
and it's a compilation, and somebody posted it, and I thought this is a compilation that somebody made up. It's parody, right? No, it's fucking real. The Democratic Party put that shit out.
They have been doing some self-owned stuff. They're like, even Fetterman it's like, we are the party of wagging finger HR, theater kids, unfun, just and it's like, this isn't winning people. This is just this is just voter repellent.
Well, it's it's bizarre also that because I was going to say earlier, Fetterman is the one, he feels like a ray of hope to me
I like him I follow him. I like him on some stuff, on some important. How I look at it is this: people are like, well, how can you vote for this person if they think this and this? I'm like, well, I can have 10 political opinions on topics, but they're not all weighted the same.
Right.
But some outweigh others. Okay, so I might disagree with the person I vote for on this. Let's weighted 9th, where I agree with him or her on 1 and 3 a lot.
And I gotta say, the alternative, like I said, being worse, I think actually maybe nerd is a good word for it, because that is how I would classify JD Vance.
Dude, I'm loving the memes with him with the halo and the red,
and being a baby, the baby face. Yeah. Well, no, it was during that thing where they were meeting with Zelensky that made me regret ever saying, and I believe I said it publicly, but I will cop to it, and I'm going to cop to it on every show I go on where it comes up, that I regret saying that he felt like the only normal person running in the 2024 race. And he still kind of does come off that way compared to the others who were there. But again, the bar's on the floor. He is clearly a person, and I'm stealing this from Michael Moynihan of the Fifth Column, and he's also works with the Free Press a bit. But he would, he's great. And he started following me recently, which felt like a good professional goal. But I'm stealing this from him. But he said that JD Vance is basically treating it's like real life is like Twitter. Like, did you guys watch that? I don't want to get too derailed into the whole Zelensky thing, but did you watch the 40-minute? Like,
no,
I only watched bits and pieces.
Yeah, and the thing is, people saying like, "Oh, if you watch the whole context, it makes Zelensky look bad." I'm like, and I watch it. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It makes him look like he fucked up. He lost control of his emotions during a diplomatic meeting. You can't do that. I accept that as a criticism, but it's also completely negating the fact that JD Vance acted like this while actually kind of Reddit dork. Like just being like, I'm just going to say something to dunk on the Biden administration. Like, you're not on the campaign trail, dude. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's this guy is like, you don't have to like him. You don't have to like his country, but you can't be saying bullshit. Like, have you ever once said thank you? I have never seen a more obsequious I almost said third world leader. That's insulting, but I have never seen a more obsequious leader that, if I'm helping getting that word right, than Zelensky. He thanks the United States constantly. Like it's just because it's not about that. It's about getting a Twitter dunk in real life. And I said this on Twitter, actually, where funny enough, I said, if JD Vance is the best we have on the right and AOC is the best we have on the left of like millennial leaders, we're fucked. I don't want that is a Sophie's choice for me. That's more of a Sophie's choice in the election that last year. Like, dear Lord, like we need to have some Gen X in there for a while.
Quick, tie this back to Nazi somehow. we need
Trump and Vance are like Nazis. No, it doesn't work. It never works. I definitely have more to say on that whole front, and I would love to come back and talk about movie related stuff too, because I have thoughts on that stuff too. There's a lot of, I actually kind of do want to know what you guys liked from last year, so I can make a list of something to actually watch.
Ben's better for that. I don't watch a whole lot of newer movies.
Just watch like the same 3 movies ad infinitum,
or like
weird
UHF being one of them, right?
Exactly.
That's there's worse movies to watch on repeat. Let's just put it that way. That's a good one.
Yeah, Alex, I'll send you. What I actually have a whole list. I'll just send you I screenshot it, so I write mini reviews.
Oh, right.
So I won't send you those because I could have spoilers or whatever. I'll send you what I rated. So you're like, oh, well, you gave that a good score. That you look that up. That sounds interesting to throw that on.
Sounds good.
I'll text that over to you.
Sounds good. All right. I don't know if there's anything else to say about Nazis except that they're bad. How about that?
Oh, yeah. We always say that. Nazis are bad. Nazis, for the algorithm, Nazis are bad.
They're the worst. I mean, so are the communists, but they're bad too.
Oh, don't even get me started. Different episode. No, I think it's totally ridiculous that hammer and sickles can be like used everywhere, and swastikas, which are bad. They're bad.
Unless it's Tibetan, then it's fine. Fine. Native American tribes that use it, it's fine.
But those go the other way.
Yes, exactly.
But like the Soviets killed also not just a lot of people, but a lot of Jews too.
Yep.
And we're not getting into that right now.
We're not getting into that.
and that was Nazi talk.
Thanks for having me for that. I'm always down for Nazi talk.
So we'll have you on against Tuner.
For sure.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, man. And why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Well,
exact coordinates.
It's exact coordinates. San Fernando Valley, and I host History Impossible. That you can find it everywhere. I actually found out recently more people listen to my show on Spotify than Apple Podcasts. I guess I don't really use Spotify for podcasts, but I
found out recently. Sorry, I found out recently we're not on Apple Podcast.
Yeah, you guys gotta submit.
Our last guest was like, "And you guys aren't on Apple Podcast." I'm like, "We're not." It's been 3 years.
All you got to do is just submit. I don't know.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's easy enough. But
we're too real for
Apple. Yeah, you're too real for that shit.
Yeah, we keep it real.
You say fuck you to the algorithm. You ride that high of skirting the edge of YouTube's terms of service or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, History Impossible. It's everywhere you can find a podcast except YouTube. Like I was saying earlier, I haven't made that jump. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll learn to start saying things like grape and corn
Yeah.
Or what would the Nazi alternative be?
The Nazi. That's actually in a movie, Tusk.
Oh,
where it's
yeah?
like, they have something called they have a podcast
Oh,
called
yeah.
the
Nazi Party.
and he's like, spell it. Yeah, before the Nazi party, he's like, spell it.
Yeah, you have to spell it. Yeah, so
Goose
yeah,
Steppers, maybe like the Goose Steppers party or something, or like
Goose
the-
Steppers. There we go. Yeah, we can call or the Mustache Man. I've heard that.
Yeah,
I've heard that said a lot. But there's so many other figures that get flagged, and I found that out the hard way with Instagram too. I once shared an image of Himmler, and I got my account suspended for 3 days.
Oh shit!
And the caption was talking about how he was a total tool and a monster. Like it didn't matter though, and I was able to get it back, but it sucked. But yeah, so maybe one day I'll be on YouTube. We'll see. I don't know. I tried my hand at streaming games, but I couldn't keep a regular schedule on that. But I do have a Twitch account too. People can find me on Twitter. And that's actually, if you look up History Impossible, you'll find it. But my handle is at @ARaderVon. And that's ARADERVON. And I think that's about it. I don't think I go. Oh yeah, sorry, X. It's not Twitter anymore.
Yeah.
I roll.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's always a blast
Yes.
chatting with you, dude. And yeah,
sure.
let's do it again sometime soon, huh?
Yes, please.
All right.
All right, everybody. Stay reckless.
All right, let's fight the crits.
Stay reckless.